Hello, everybody. This is Susan Kokinda with your midweek update. Today is September the 4th. 4 weeks ago, I titled my update Fascism with a Democratic Face. Over the recent days, the elites have dispensed with the democratic face part of their strategy. Matt Taibbi came to the same conclusion as we have, posting a piece today entitled, Liberalism Has Just Removed Its Mask. So look at the sweep of it. Brazil banned X and is threatening to fine its citizens almost $9,000 a day if they try and circumvent the ban on VPN. Former Clinton Labor Secretary Robert Reich wants Musk, the owner of X, arrested and all of his government contracts canceled. The majority coalition of the anti-establishment party in the German state elections is now being called into question by a reassessment of the vote, not unlike what happened in France a few months ago, where Marie Le Pen's party won a majority but got maneuvered out of governing by various parliamentary tricks. For the elites, democracy is fine as long as the outcome is to their liking. But this goes beyond democracy. We are, after all, a constitutional republic, something which has been hated by the forces of the empire since our founding. Saturday's New York Times did let it all hang out. They carried an opinion piece by one of their book editors, Jennifer July, entitled, "The Constitution is Sacred. Is it also dangerous? One of the biggest threats to America's politics might be the country's founding document." Now, it shouldn't be a shock to followers of Promethean Action that this author earned her master's degree from the London School of Economics, has written for the London Review of Books, two premier institutions of the Anglo-American elite. I'm going to leave it to my colleague Robert Ingram, who has written and spoken extensively on the principles which produced our magnificent Constitution, to dissect her arguments. But the intention of such a piece is obvious. Get people to begin to question the need to keep the U.S. Constitution. It reminds me of an infamous book entitled Congressional Government, which was written by Woodrow Wilson way back in the 1880s, decades before he, as president, presided over the disaster of World War I and ushered in the establishment of the Federal Reserve. Wilson boasted that he was among the first to question the validity and the principles of the American Constitution. And he went on to call for transforming the United States into a parliamentary democracy modeled on the British Parliament. Wilson and the British forces behind him felt compelled to come out of the closet, so to speak, and propose replacing the American system with the British system, precisely because the world had just witnessed the rebirth of the American system under President Abraham Lincoln. And his presidency, of course, had come into being because of the creation of a new party, the Republican Party, a party of workers, farmers, manufacturers, and of course, Black Americans. Followers of Promethean Action know that the new 2024 Republican Party platform revives that very movement, dedicating itself to the forgotten men and women of America and pledging again to become the party of industry, manufacturing, infrastructure, and workers. It will do this by reviving the policies of physical economic growth that will be fueled by the productive and creative powers of the population. This is the mortal threat to the imperial elites. They cannot control a population which is driven by such optimistic progress. And in fact, in Wilson's book, he explicitly lashes out at the American system by name, and he decries the infrastructure policies of the 19th century, especially under Lincoln, which had led to growth and to budget surpluses. Believe it or not, Woodrow Wilson actually attacked budget surpluses, obviously preferring the nation to be up to its ears in debt under a central banking system, which he did manage to institute when he became president. It is the reemergence of this American system coalition, both politically and economically, which we're calling the American System 2.0, which is driving the global elites to drop their mask. The elements of the Lincoln Republican Party are once again coming to the fore. We've covered extensively the shift toward Trump in the rank and file of the labor movement. Promethean Action organizers continue to join our friend Brian Panabaker, founder of Auto Workers for Trump, in weekly rallies at auto plants in the Detroit area, where we find that more than a majority of trade unionists of all races are supporting Donald Trump. Panabaker was on stage with Donald Trump last week, where he backed up Trump's warnings of the existential threat to the auto industry presented by the Harris-Biden green mandates. And Panabaker was interviewed last night on National Fox on the Laura Ingraham show. Now, Teamster members have just finished voting on who to endorse for president. The Teamsters president, Sean O'Brien, blew circuits when he spoke to the Republican National Convention in July. That is, he blew Democratic circuits by addressing the Republican convention, and he blew a bunch of Republican circuits by standing up for the importance of unions, that is, unions that actually defend their workers. The Teamsters, who've already had a sit-down with Donald Trump, are still waiting for Kamala Harris to pin down a date for their sit-down discussion. Is she going to have to bring Tim Walz along before they make a final endorsement decision? So that's the labor side of the new coalition. Last week, Black Texas State Representative Sean Thierry blew up the political landscape by announcing that she was leaving the Democratic Party to join the Republican Party. She said, "I now stand with the party of Lincoln. In 2024, the Republican Party champions economic empowerment. It is the party that fosters prosperity, fulfilling the promise of the American dream." We have more details about her announcement and where it came from on the Promethean Action website, and I encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter. Of course, all of this comes in the wake of the RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard endorsements of Donald Trump. Last week, Nicole Shanahan, RFK Jr.'s running mate, released a powerful video on X entitled "Finish the Story, Bobby." In a few short minutes, it takes you from Eisenhower's warnings of the military-industrial complex to JFK's presidency and his assassination, to RFK's 1968 campaign and his assassination, and then to Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s endorsement of Donald Trump. As someone who was campaigning for Bobby Kennedy in 1968 in California when he was shot, and who has barely been able to look at a video of Bobby Kennedy since then, I and millions of others have been profoundly moved by this. We've featured it prominently on Promethean Action's website, and again, I urge you to subscribe. Now, something very, very powerful is afoot in the world, but especially in our country. The tools used by the oligarchy to subjugate us are failing, and they are desperate. They were becoming desperate in the 1960s. JFK had unleashed a spirit of optimism, grounded in the new frontier thinking of the Apollo Project. Our economy and our standard of living were improving in real terms because of the technological advances and the increases in productivity created by the Moon Project. Think back to the tools that the elite used in the 1960s. Brutal assassinations. JFK in 1963, Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy in 1968. Before the 1968 assassinations, there were rumors that RFK, Martin Luther King Jr., and UAW President Walter Reuther were in discussions to form a third party if the Democratic Party continued its decline, as it subsequently has, into being a tool of the elites. 2 years later, after the assassinations of King and Kennedy, Reuther and his wife died in a small plane crash. So they've tried assassinations of American presidents twice since then. They failed, but we saw the very close attempt against Reagan in 1981 and the failed, by the grace of God, attempt against Donald Trump in Butler just 2 months ago. The empire really hates presidents in our constitutional republic, especially when the presidency is occupied by individuals of courage and vision. The recently released movie, Reagan, which is getting a profound response from audiences, captures precisely that quality, especially as it develops Ronald Reagan's singular fight for the establishment of the Strategic Defense Initiative, something which Donald Trump has pledged to revive. Many of us at Promethean Action were intimately involved in that fight back in the 1980s. Lyndon LaRouche played a direct and seminal role in Reagan's adoption of that policy, and we will be reporting more on that important history in the days to come. Contrast that question of the uniqueness of individuals who embody the intention that our founding fathers had for the presidency, like Lincoln, the Kennedys, Reagan, and Trump, to the abomination of what has apparently been governing our country for the past 4 years and what is intended to govern it for the next 4, that is, if we manage to avoid World War III. They have given us a collective, a committee, a privy council, serving an emperor or an empress who has no clothes on, or has no actual identity except for the one created for her. It's hard to tell if Kamala changes her accents more often than she changes her positions. And I do in this case mean her political positions. Such an empty construct in the presidency leaves the world in incredible danger, because only an actual American president, in concert with other world leaders such as Putin and others, will be able to resolve the crises facing us. Will be able to resolve the Ukraine-Russia war before it goes nuclear, or the crisis in the Mideast. The general strike against the Netanyahu government, because of its failure to negotiate a hostage release, makes a complex situation in Israel even more complex. For those who like to say, I stand with Israel, it does present the paradox of who do you stand with in Israel? The millions on the streets, or the Netanyahu government and the religious extremists who make negotiations nearly impossible? Only a president with the skills of a Donald Trump is going to be able to reverse this extremely dangerous dynamic. That underscores the task before us, winning the election for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance so that a unity government, an American System 2.0 government, can indeed finish the story. With the mask coming off, with the oligarchy openly declaring its intention to ban free speech, to rip up the Constitution, and to intensify its full spectrum, whole of society information warfare, what do? We organize, organize, organize. Find your place in this process. If you're in a swing state, join Trump Force 47. If you're not in a swing state, join Trump Talks 47 and make calls into a swing state. Find a worthy local campaign to support. Use our Promethean guide to the 2024 Republican Party platform to talk to people who are not yet Trump supporters. Become a poll worker, but engage your fellow Americans directly. War only works in a controlled environment, which is why they want to ban free speech. Trump, Musk, RFK Jr., they've broken that control, but you have to magnify it, and we will continue to provide you the tools to do that. So this has been your midweek update. Thanks for listening.
Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at prometheanaction.com.